Hey there, Carlen. Can you hear me, Carlen?
Hey guys, Nico and I were just in the other chat room.
Oh, hey.
Then I realized there's another link already. Hey Brett, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right. It's been a really full day, but still going.
Yeah, right on. Hi, Carlen. So,
I gave Nico
there's
the link.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hello, hello.
Hello again.
Hello. So you guys were already chatting.
A little bit, just got into whereabouts we're from and things like that. And,
Cool.
Just 2 minutes.
Yeah. Do you want to just continue where you like it's perfectly reasonable? Like there's no format today. Like the most important thing is like heart connection, like vision connection, and then whatever the next time or the no time we figure out, is there something you guys like literally need to be doing together today or tomorrow or the next day? But you must be on each other's radar was my premise was you must be on each other's radar, and you're working on things so fundamentally similar that you should know each other because you can lean on each other, because not many people do what you do. That's like number one. Even with the bandwidth you already have and the projects you're doing, like I felt you should still have this awareness, because it could be people that you actually talk to more, like become friends with, because it's so much similar. That's just number one. Maybe not. And then two, like practically, even from my selfish perspective, is there anything that both of you are doing that will uplift each other or save time or make something more efficient, or like have an aha moment between you for each of your projects, whatever, just for the sake of the planet and getting this type of software out there. So
yeah, absolutely.
So that's my intention. And I'm making my movie finally, like no holds barred. So this is like one of the scenes in the movie. And I want to not lose the footage of people meeting each other and having these conversations, because the plain truth is we all go back and watch Terrence McKenna talk to like Rupert Sheldrake videos. We watch David Bohm, like, or I do, I should say I do, I'm a geek. So I watch David Bohm talk to Krishnamurti, or maybe more relevant, like Lex Fridman, like podcasts and stuff. So I'm not going for the full blown like effects right now and production values, but as far as I'm concerned, this is me covering the story that matters to me, just like Lex Fridman might do in his genres with the different AI and consciousness and physics, but this is kind of my version of that. So yeah, so thanks for coming, guys. And
Yeah.
really, I'll turn it back to Nico and Rene. Just kind of keep going with where you were, and then if I feel like there's something I need to say, I will. But and there's no rules, no rules about what you share or your background or biography. We're not doing that. So we'll just go with the flow. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, thanks for setting this up, Brett. And it's just like you said, I saw your work, Nicolas, I think a month or two ago, and I quickly looked over it and then recently looked more into it. And then I talked to Brett, and we already had a very similar vision, and he said you should definitely connect to Nicolas. And it's very true what you say, Brett. There's not many people that are so aligned with such similar visions, and so I totally agree. We should be aware of each other and see what comes from there. But in the first place, just connect. Carlen is also on this call as my co-founder and good friend. And I see we have.
Yeah, I'll be probably more a fly on the wall in this conversation. May jump in here or there a little bit, but yeah.
That's cool. And Nico, for your reference point, Carlen is friendly with Miranda from Colorado, who Andrea and I have been friends with since 2017 when we went there for the barber thing. And Miranda's involved with Core Nexus and a bunch of different stuff. So this is, again, part of this is about us having a use case and our fractal like coming out of the woodworks. Like there's skills in here, like Carlen has some developers on front end stuff. You know, there's funding between different people, there's skills. Like this is another iteration of figuring out how we all actually work together in more powerful ways. So there's all these connections too. It's not random in that sense.
Yeah.
Cool. I just scanned over the email thread about if I missed any link. I mean, so I don't know much about what you guys are doing. I mean, I'm really interested to hear if Brett says it's super similar, then it's like, so. I mean, do you have any, first of all, is there anything you can send me right? Okay, there's a link.
There's a link. I didn't send any links. I realized it now.
I mean, I think if Rene shared like just 1 or 2 slides he shared with me as an entry point, you'll clearly.
I can enter, and I kind of know where we connect, so I can speak into that. And
yeah,
then,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, if Rene, if you were so gracious to kind of do that, then Nico, you wouldn't even have to look at anything because he's creating something that like takes away the data from the interface and it uses triplets and like it almost wraps languages like you would. So it's like, yeah, you're going to be talking the same language, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, Rene, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing your vision in a nutshell, whatever you want to do to bring us into that.
Absolutely. And the links I just shared are a bit more like, let's connect on the big vision and then our way of approaching that. The first building blocks are the links I shared. I think the place where we really connect is as I'm learning still the right terminology and reading in your guys' field. There are some really good terms there, but agent-centric definitely resonates. There's a vision that I've been working on for a long time of interconnected data and linked data, and a semantic web in that sense, and also seeing a web where users can really choose how they view the data. So you have this web of interconnected data, you go from node to node through this web, and you as a user should be able to choose how you present that data, and the interface being fluid or being able to view a certain data point through different lenses and you could say different perspectives. That's part of the larger vision of what we're working towards, as well as some semantic AI, so using linked data with words and semantics to generate a collective AI that reflects our collective intelligence. So really reasoning-based and semantic-based, logic-based, reasoning-based on semantics and words. That's also in there, but I think the first bit that I said is really what we really connect on and have a very similar vision on. To give you just a little hint of how we're approaching that, what I realized is that early on, trying to build similar things like this, is that I really need to double down on the standards, being RDF and the semantic web standards and some Sparkle, and only in the last few years we've been really into Shackle. Have you heard of Shackle, Nicolas?
I think I might have heard it, but I can't remember any association now.
So that's Shapes. It's an ontology that came out. So you have RDF, RDFS, OWL, and then quite recently you have Shackle, which is Shapes. And once I looked into that, I was like, yes, this was the key that was missing. Semantic web being difficult to be applicable to typical thinking and object-oriented thinking, and therefore people struggle with it.
How do you spell that? SHAKLE or?
I'll put it in the chat. It's with a C. Shackle.
Okay.
So what Shackle does, basically, it gives you restrictions on how the graph looks in triples. So you have a node, it needs to have a certain type, if it needs to have at least one name, and all friends need to be of the type person, for example. So you basically say, however far into the graph you want to go, however deep, you're defining a shape of what sort of properties a certain node must have to validate as an instance of this shape. And that really strict data validation and keeping the data super clean, which is has been a struggle in the semantic web world. So what we've done over the years, I've been developing a JavaScript framework for RDF and for linked data to make it easier to work with. So it comes with an in-memory graph database. We've also developed a reasoner, a reasoning engine, and we made this resource-centric, which means for a developer, instead of like abstract searching your local database, you literally have a node and you request properties, or you say, get me all properties and get those properties of that node, those nodes. So it's a really nice user-friendly API for developers, I think. And recently we really honed in on tying that to components. So really honing in on the user interface. So with our library, you can create interface components that get linked to a specific Shackle shape. And this was really, that's why I mentioned Shackle. That was the key we were looking for. So now we have components, and the first link I gave you, link.org, is our library of components. And it's still a bit empty, but it's going to be growing in the coming months. So in there, you can find components that are linked to certain shapes. And those shapes in turn use classes and properties of certain ontologies. And that's how we are building. We're really focusing on building reusable building blocks, which can be an interface component or can also be a function. So a person can be emailed, for example, or an MP3 can be split in a universal reusable way, so that as long as people start using these semantic ontologies, which are open data structures, then they can quite easily connect these interface components with a single line of code. And we realized that that's where a lot of inefficiency is. As a developer, you always get your data structure, and then you need to start coding and connect the right dots to the bits of interface. But since the interfaces already expect these open data structures, as long as you map your data to the right kind of triplets, you can just use the component as is and configure it from there. Yeah. And on top of that, we're building, so that's our open source project, and then we're building an app builder and a content management system. So a drag and drop app builder for linked data and these components, so that you can quite easily connect any data or import data from open data sets. Then we see which shapes are in there, and then we see which components we have for that, and you can combine them. So that's our stuff in a nutshell. Yeah, do you want to jump in?
I was already holding back, so but I'm happy to. I mean, so I didn't know about Shackle, so I think I might have heard, but never looked into it. Which now I'm like, okay, maybe I should have, because it's super related to what we're doing with well, we call it social DNA. and we use Prolog to basically also define these things. We kind of how to say, like the last bigger components we added and also made usable. So we have our own system where you can just annotate a TypeScript class, and that automatically creates the Prolog definition of this. We call it subject class. It's hinting towards subject-oriented programming, because it's, you know, it's not objectively defining something, but it's using the triplets and the graph. You know, I can have this subjective interpretation that, you know, I treat this as an event, or I treat this as, you know, I don't know, a message or a post, or depending on, you know, and then it's doing these checks automatically if everything is there for that class. Yeah, looks like that's maybe something where we might have reinvented the wheel, not seeing that shackle is there. But I'm wonder like what, how these things can work together. And I mean, yeah, the rest that you say, like taking these defining components that combine that with UI is something I'm also really interested in, and is one of the things I want to build towards. It's just we have started more on the lower end, and also with the Atom executor and our components, we have a system where it's basically a spanning layer over different back-end technologies. It's mostly built on and you know, tended towards holochain. But so we have this abstraction of languages, which we kind of also import into the whole semantic stuff with the schema, where so the links in the triplets, so the Atom executor allows for like different schemas that are Atom languages to be used. And these Atom languages are packages, JavaScript code that includes, or that's where the language developer can make the decision how to actually exchange the objective data that, you know, is behind that link, which, you know, in semantic web, or we just do HTTP, you know, it's just an HTTP connection where we get the data from. But so one of the main additions of Atom on that level is that this is pluggable, and you know, I can find in somebody else's graph, I can find a link pointing to a new language, and then I take that address and I use the bootstrapping languages in Atom. There's a language of languages where I can resolve that and download the source code, install it if the signature is, you know, if I trust the author, and that's how the system can be can evolve and can be evolvable in terms of like what actually the back-end technology that's used for it.
Can I ask a question there? When you say install, you mean like a Linux machine? In the end, you install a new, like you install Haskell or like some sort of programming language on your local machine.
On your local machine, correct, but not just it's not on the operating system level. So the Atom definition of a language is a JavaScript package module. Atom, so there are Atom nodes, Atom executors that run on your machine locally, and they also run, they have a JavaScript engine and they run the languages. So the executor also runs a holochain node and an IPFS node, and basically injects you know, a context object with functions to remote control IPFS and holochain into the languages. So, but the language itself is just JavaScript, you know, that implements a certain interface, basically just a function that returns an object, you know, of like can return different shapes of objects to implement different language types. But the main language type is, or the simple one is just, it's basically just a mapping between an address, like that's local to that language, and the actual data, and the ability for an agent to create data. It's just coming from a pure agent-centric standpoint. we call it languages because that's how, as an agent, in an agent-centric network, everything we can do is just exchange messages or expressions. I can express myself, and I use the language for that. And the way I think about it is, we do that already. Like I create an expression on Telegram or WhatsApp or Facebook or Twitter or email or Zoom. But for me as a human, those things are connected in my perspective, in my psyche anyways, because, it's just different means of getting, to somebody else. So with Adam, I'm trying to reflect that and give the same flexibility and evolvability on the digital level that, we have on the human level.
Yeah, very cool. There's a lot of overlap, and there's also some very interesting parts where you go deeper, especially in what you're speaking of, the languages. Like what we do is, I think how it relates to what we do is that we have triple stores or quad stores that can be implemented with any API. So we have one for IPFS, and we would love to play with HoloChain at some point. And that's how we abstract something similar, where any application can have its own store and its own implementation. So there's different places from where the data can come from. And I'd love to at some point learn more about.
Are those?
I feel your languages go into a deeper level than just exchanging data. It's not just an API interface for retrieving and writing data. Is there? Okay.
Well, I wonder if I should pull up some kind of graph or. But let me first ask. When you said triple stores, so you talk about the place where you store the graph, the triples. Okay.
Yeah.
So in Adam, there's a differentiation between that. We have that as well. So I would just go, we have a new website that's up. I don't know if you went to it in the last days. I'm really happy with the new website. And I will just go there and share my screen because I want to show you this diagram.
Cool.
So Adam's ontology consists of three things: agents, languages, and perspectives. I talked about languages already. It's basically wrapping how we actually store the objective data and how we retrieve it. But then apps would usually not interface with that directly, but they use perspectives, and perspectives are graphs. Those are the triple stores. And the idea is that starting agent-centrically, these things are all, baked into the runtime, which is running on every node. So I have my own local private perspectives. They're just like files. I can create them and do whatever I want with them. But then I can actually combine these private perspectives with languages and construct something that we call neighborhoods. And that's a shared perspective. That's basically, I have my local perspective, and then when I share it and you join this thing, you also have a local perspective, but they are entangled. Like that's what Adam provides and what the link language basically does. This is again, we're not locking into any technology. We have one on HoloChain that works pretty well. But users could choose to have a different link language that implements the sharing of these perspectives. The point is that we just introduced this high-level concept. There is a shared, you use the term triple store, like perspective, graph, that we all co-create. And the idea is that with Adam, you create that once for your team, and then you can use different apps and like different ways of writing to this shared graph and reading. You don't need to recreate a new group. And then the last step is to add what we call social DNA, which is like the shackle stuff, the components. It's like defining in a way, this graph pattern means something specific. And then also adding, like that's only one part. Social DNA really is it when we use that to say, well, there is a certain pattern. We use these specific shapes in this process in order to make decisions, for instance. And that's how in a way where it's not bind to a certain backend technology and also not bind to an app, but really purely just in the context of this group, we have defined how they create coherence. And that's kind of the main goal to get there with Adam.
Yeah, really cool. And so much overlap and slightly different terminology and approaches, but it's really cool. And yeah, this what you call shared perspective, that's also very much what we're working on in the sense of having a shared graph. I don't know if you've heard of Flurry. That's something we're exploring. Flurry. It's a blockchain-based semantic web graph database. And we're waiting for their new release where they really go properly semantic web standard. But the idea there, the way we're seeing that is that it depends on where you store this graph, but at the level of where the graph is stored, you can store also your authorization rules and who has access to what. And this would be literally at the graph level, at the database level, in the case of Flurry. Otherwise, you need some layer on top of it to ensure of that. And I think Holochain can also really help with that. And I'd love to explore that at some point. So yeah, the idea is, like you said, you have a shared graph that you can all access. We think of it as an open data set. It can be literally a public for the whole world, or the United States government also releases like linked data sets. There's a lot of science being done in the last 10 years that's been published, but there's not enough tools yet to properly use it. So an evolution of that could be data spaces that we collectively own and have rights to read and to write to a certain degree. And different ways, everyone can have their own ways to interact with that, like you said, independent of the app. And so that's what we're focused on a lot with those like interfaces that basically can come alive based on either your lens, like your preferences. So I think we use that term slightly different. When you say perspective, what I understand now is that that's your personal graph, but maybe we can go in next into what that graph consists of, like what a perspective consists of.
Yeah. So first of all, it's the way I use the term perspectives in Adam is more general. It's yes, you have it starts there, right? That's the base level implementation. There are private local perspectives, graphs. But I mean, you can share them as a neighborhood. You can also create a snapshot and just have the whole graph like in a JSON file and store that in an expression. That's also a perspective. Like yeah, so what we have built into Adam is also a way to send direct messages between agents, or in the neighborhood we have a direct like holochain signals, meaning similar to WebRTC, just sending a signal to another agent. All these also use perspectives as an argument, or as like what is being sent. So in a way, I think of perspectives as like a suggestion for that's the building block. Like that's the new, like what is the object in Ruby or an object-oriented programming language. I think of like, let's have perspectives be that, because the way I'm calling it perspective because it's the combination of objective data stored in the languages, or if you don't use my terminology and just semantic web, it's like the resources or the stuff you link to, you point to, and then how you set them into context through triples, how you create these associations. That's contextual information that really conveys the meaning, which is semantic web. So the way
how's that contextual information expressed?
How is it expressed? I mean,
so So what I understand is that perspectives are the data, but it's not objective data that can only be seen in one way. It's like my perspective of it, which I translate to shackle shapes, because then I give names to the same resources and their links. I view a subset of it in my own language.
Well, if you don't jump into the agent-centric paradigm, which Holochain is really like promoting, in some way I'm just taking that, extending that, and trying to make it more clear, accessible, and less text specific. But there is a shift in thinking where if you don't allow in your thinking data to be a fundamental thing, but instead always saying, well, that's not the case. The fundamental thing is agents, and then data is something that an agent says or receives. It's already in your ontology, fundamentally always contextualized as being an expression in a way, and not fundamentally true, not objective. And so I'm starting from there, and now I'm trying to integrate the semantic web thinking into that paradigm. And then I call this a scope for like these graphs perspective, because there can be many different, like where do I store them? Who has control over these graphs?
Yeah, so if I, am I correct if I translate it, like I love what you're saying, and I want to learn to think in these like agent-centric ways and terminologies, but just so that I understand the way you see it, I think I understand now. A perspective is a scope of RDF triples, so it's basically a subgraph. It's a certain graph of triples, seen not as objective truth, but as the expression of an agent.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
That's really helpful, by the way. I'm learning something new, Nico, about your perspective on perspectivism. and I think it's really important and great. And also to catch it on video is Rene, like if you guys can link your own on jargon, let's just keep it simple, forget ontologies. But yeah, like Rene, if you're able to play it back from your lens, like of the semantic web more and all these things you're using, and then Nico is able to say, okay, translate right back into perspective and then back and forth, like that creates it's super helpful for people. And there's also why I'm recording this, like there's other people in the world that need to want to understand these things. So like I found it very helpful for when you guys are translating it back and forth into how you're like with the tech you're working with, and seeing that you're getting it, like you're able to do that, which I'm always just into because I'm not a technologist. So I love watching that happen. And I'm also learning more, Nico, about even from the marketing thing, like, agents and signals, because I love that. It's like we're building our own it's like World War III, right? Like the spiritual warfare, and we're building our own, like, signaling agent, undercover agent with signals and stuff. It's quite fun, right? Like the mycelial network is like needing to like take the power back, right? So that's just really cool and fun to see, and then understand, Nico. It's just the way you've just put it, with the expression being from the agent and agent centric, and the semantic part of it, like that just totally clicked for me more than it had in the past. So yeah,
great.
So how did you relate, Nico, to what Rene was saying when he put it into the RDF triplet there? And like, is he like grasping?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just wanted to share just the definition of perspective. So you and even with code if you want, because then maybe it's clear. Let me just and I mean, stop me if anything is like, I don't know, not the right answer, or like I mean, so this is the definition, really the core definition of a perspective, which so we create GraphQL code from this, which is the interface between UI and the LM executor, and it's used in the languages and in our main executor implementation right now. So
GraphQL, you said?
Yeah. So a perspective is really just something that has links, which is an array of link expressions. Now, what is a link expression? So it's basically a link that is wrapped by our expression. Let me first maybe show you the link, which we have here. A link is the triple.
Mhm.
Source, target, and predicate. And so it's wrapped by an expression object which has the author timestamp, and proof which contains the signature and the key with which it signs. I mean, or just pointing to which key of the DID document of this author is used, because we represent agents with DIDs.
Yeah, so you're tracking for each link. By link, I would say an RDF triple, which has a subject, predicate, and object. You're tracking for each of those the author, a timestamp, and a proof of where.
Correct.
Yeah, who says it and why they, what the truth of it is.
So this expression is what we use for all Adam languages. That's the difference between. If it wouldn't be agent centric, then it wouldn't be called expression but object, and language wouldn't be called language but maybe data store adapter or something like that, and we wouldn't have these fields. So conceptually, the idea is we say there is no objective data, so we don't even look at it if it doesn't have the author, timestamp, and signature, because it's garbage, because we don't know who said it. So the same must be true for links if we want to share them. I mean, I can have my own local links in my own local perspective, but the moment I want to turn it into a shared neighborhood and I share these links through a link language with other agents, like really through the internet, then they need to be link expressions. And then the co-created neighborhood is really so it's cryptographically signed, which also means that the social DNA, where's now the here? So we can actually use that in our social organism to, well, have cryptographic correctness about these links. So we can, in our in the social DNA, in the shapes and everything we compute on top of it, we can actually, without enforcing some kind of central store or role or blockchain, we can have smart contract DAO-like correctness because of these signatures.
Cool. Yeah, so you're really going into tracking truth statements, which is definitely a big potential of the semantic web, and tracking who says what and provenance, where it comes from, and I like that you're going even in the cryptographic nature of it. There's a lot. Really check out Flurry, because they do something very similar. They extend links, triplets, with 3 other things. They always have the key of the author, and they have a timestamp when it was last changed. And the way they build up their graph is it starts empty. It's like a chain, a blockchain, and every change in the graph is a new link in the chain. So you can always go back and query back in time, and that's how they build up a chain of changes in truth statements, and they always track who changed what, and on a blockchain level. So you always need the right keys to access the data and stuff like that. But yeah, there's some overlap there. But the cool thing for the way you've built this is that it's on a higher level. It's not necessarily on the database level, but it's more on it could be on any infrastructure, as long as they run this JavaScript in a certain way without it being mingled with, I guess, which is what Heistory Chain would allow. Do I say that correct?
So I guess what I want to look into Flurry, but what I guess could be feasible, maybe even easy, if they already have similar, if they already basically have the expression fields for what they store, then we could maybe build a link language using Flurry, which means that users of Atom, I will stop sharing here. So with Atom, users can, when they create a community, select, do I want this on Holochain or Flurry? And that's independent of the apps, you know, because the apps are just, they just assume access to some kind of shared graph. How that is shared is not up to the app. I mean, a specific app can basically bring its own link language and suggest it, but it's up to the user to.
So does the database layer need to have the ability to store, I think you call them expressions, so the extension of links where you store the author and a hash. Does the database layer need to be able to store triplets with more info? Or do you store all those things in triplets, or that doesn't matter? Just trying to...
It needs to be able to store link expressions. So which are objects with author timestamp, proof, signature and key, and in the data, the triple.
Yeah, and I guess in theory, the link expression could even be expressed in more links. If you have it.
Well, that's the Atom, but then so we have changed that interface for the link language one time, and I guess we're just about to change it again. We only have one really fully working implementation right now, and we are still so we discover things and with that and that's why we might change that interface, but we made it a bit in like have that Git like flavor where we have revisions for the different versions of that shared graph, and then have the change sets are just links of lists of these link expressions, additions and removals. And then it's weird, and this is what our implementation currently does on Holochain as well. It's like a Holochain based distributed Git where so if I use Flux, which is the app we are building, chat app, and I add chat messages on my machine and I'm not connected, it will still create these Holochain entries and add it to the graph, and once I connect, I exchange the latest revision with the other nodes, and then the graph gets, the Git graph gets merged. And then it will yield on our side the lists of link expressions that I now have to, add to my local perspective.
Very cool. I had a question earlier when we talked about perspectives. So if we go back to this shared vision of like an application or any application where you have access to your shared data sets, to your neighborhoods, as you call them, shared data sets, let's put it like that. So the way I understand perspectives now is that it's a scope of RDF triples, but we see them as expressions of agents. I wonder, when you said perspective, I thought it might map more to what I think of as a lens. So when you have that shared data set, some of our work goes into, as an agent, how am I going to view that shared data? So it's not just about how we collectively express that data and what the truth of it is, but how is it visualized? And by lenses, I'm thinking of like the different ways I can visualize that shared data, which is my perspective, my lens onto the same thing that I could view in multiple different ways. And that could be my thinking there goes into things like, if we have Wikipedia, which is already as a graph Wikipedia as triples. If we have something like that, all of our knowledge expressed in an open graph. But the way I see it, and would be really cool if we can go to nodes, and let's say we go to yoga or something, that everyone who is involved in this concept and anyone who's interested in yoga can help define what the interface looks like, or what the lens is on a collective level, as well as subgroups on my individual level. Like I could filter down that I never want to see certain things. And I put on these lenses and I would never see that in the interface. I would never interact with the data in that way. But in the same way, I put on the lens of the global lens and I see a summary of what everyone thinks yoga is about. And I wondered if there's anything you're thinking there. Because when you said perspectives, that's what I was thinking of. And now I see it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. It's okay. I should have made, okay. So the framing of all of this is Adam is like, there are different terms I can use now. So I would say it's a framework, but also it's an engine, a social network engine, and it's a spanning layer, a network itself. So let me, maybe that's why I just showed you the launcher, which I have running here. This is the Adam logo, and this is the Adam launcher running in the background. And I have two perspectives in here, which I actually shared as neighborhoods. I have some languages installed. I have apps connected. So this is because we were just testing like the same app, the Flux. This is the app we're building with Adam, connected to it, which I will show you in a moment. I first want to show you the Adam CLI, which also was showing there as an app. So we have CLI. I can say Adam perspectives, and it shows me the two perspectives I have. And it even shows that they are shared as a neighborhood. You see, this is using we have a neighborhood language. So this is using the neighborhood language to actually share the data that you need to, for somebody else to join this neighborhood. And I can now take the ID and say Adam perspectives query links, and then I will see all the links. So this is all the data in that perspective. These big blocks here are the social DNA, which is stored in there as like string literal. But basically these are the triples with, subject or source, predicates, target, and author and timestamp. And so this is a way to visualize it. This is how the Adam CLI app does it. So there can be now a different app, like for instance, oh yeah, here. So this is Flux. It's like a Discord. It's a bit like Discord, and the same data you just saw is visualized here as like channels, and there are also posts. We also have a working, I'm still in here, a working WebRTC based audio video chat in there, which really just, that doesn't use, we start like in the first implementation that used the perspective, but it doesn't make sense because it's just WebRTC signaling, and that works through. So we have added another concept to these neighborhoods, telepresence. So when you have a neighborhood, the link language can also implement this interface. And then you have signals that are not stored in the graph, but you can then see who's online and send them a WebRTC signal. And then, you can have something like video chat in there through Adam as well. So yeah, that's a different way to visualize it. And then now you could just write an app that uses the Adam client and interface to connect to Adam, which then would actually show, how can I show you? I guess, wait, I can maybe go to different domain. Well, whatever. It's when you have a new app, it will trigger a handshake, and then Adam will pop up and say, "Hey, any app wants to connect," and it shows you a code, and you can basically create a capability token for that app, so it can, so it's authorized. Because these UIs don't need to be on the same machine. We actually even have here a proxy mechanism with which we can use it on our phones. So when you click this, it connects to a proxy we have set up. Okay, there's an error. I don't know. Okay, it should have connected. New bug. And then you can have the UI run on a different machine and connect to your Adam executor somewhere, and have access to all the perspectives and languages.
Cool. Yeah, I'm starting to get a really good picture of what you guys are into, and it's really cool. And something you said makes sense. You said it's many things, amongst which an engine, a spanning layer, and a network. And that's where I'm starting to see how our technologies somewhat overlap, but also extend one another. And my answer to that in our field is that we are a JavaScript library and more focused on the interface layer with a library of components. That's what we're most focused on, and then creating a builder to automate that building of those visualizations of those interface layers. Because it's like the thing you just showed, that was really cool to see. You see all the triples, and then you have built an interface for that. And my guess is that it still takes a good amount of time to build that interface. And so to make it easier for people to reuse each other's work and to make more different kind of interfaces quickly, that's really what we're focusing on. And yeah, I think potentially we could extend or connect with the language layers and with the ontologies that you use, and it could connect quite well. It will probably take some time to properly explore. Let me share something as well, just to give you a bit of insight in the code. So when you said that you're generating from annotations, you're generating these, I think you said Prolog. Did you call them DNAs, or was that Prolog generates what?
Yeah, it generates Prolog code, and we generally call the whole Prolog stuff in there social DNA, although that's maybe, it really only when you get to the full implementation, it makes sense to use this concept or to use this word social DNA. There's something in between, we call it subjects or subject classes. That's what maps to, and that's what's auto-generated. It's expressed in Prolog, but it's basically the definition of a class or of a graph pattern that is treated as an object or a thing that has properties and collections.
Cool. Yeah, that helps again with the terminology. So here we have a class, a person. Is it big enough? Yeah.
Yeah, I can read it.
So we have a person which extends to get the name, the depiction. So the way we use shapes is that in the programming world, these shapes abstract away the difficult implementation details of the shape. So as a developer, I don't need to remember that a person needs to be connected to a certain type from a certain ontology and needs to have certain properties of a certain ontology. When I'm starting to work with person, I can just say that person equals new person, and then I say person dot name equals Rene. And under the hood, this will create a new triplet that says some sort of new node, RDF type, friend of friend person, and new node, RDF label, or friend of a friend name, and Rene. So with these shapes, we're trying to make it a lot more easy to build data and to consume data and work with it. And we use something similar here with decorators. And these decorators on the back end generate the shackle shapes, which we then index. And for example, the one I'm showing you now, if I go to the index of friend of a friend, let me see. You get this. This is the actual shackle shape. You have a node, which is a node shape, and it has a bunch of properties, name, and those have further properties like whether it needs to be an integer, it needs to be required, which properties it's connected to. So that's, I think, similar to what you mean by social DNA. And to show you one of the interface components, there's a lot of comments here because we've been changing the syntax a lot. We now have automated data loading in there. That's also a strong feature that we have. So when you're building a linked application and you're using these components, the component here requests a certain shape. And of that shape, it requests specific properties. Again, you don't need to know which ontology property. You just say, give me the homepage of the person, the depiction of the person, and give them back as a certain name. And then I can retrieve them in my actual component here. And I can use them, and I don't need to do anything on a graph level. I'm just like programming up in object-oriented language. But what this does for us under the hood is that we can index for every component which data they require to run, and not even the whole shape, but which part of the shape. And now we can, the moment the page is going to render, we can see like, oh, this component is going to render this data specifically will render as that subcomponent, and we go all the way down to see all the data that it's going to need. And then we just execute one query, and that's where our data stores come in, which I think is related to the languages, where we say, okay, retrieve this from whatever store, it can be any store, it can be stored anywhere in a universal way. I'm just requesting shapes, and the store is obliged to return, if I have the access rights, to return me those shapes or those sub-shapes. And so in that sense, when you're developing a linked app, as we call it, you don't need to do any data queries anymore. You're just writing your components, your own components, like this, with your own shapes, or even better, we have this whole library of shapes and components. And if you get lucky, you can just use anything that's there, and you're just combining a few components, and all the rest, and you're connecting it to some data store, and all the rest happens for you.
Cool. Yeah, that's very, very aligned. And of course, there's also some similarity. And let me just quickly show you. This is basically the same you just showed me with, so we call it SDNA class. We're still also thinking about, we're not super happy with that interface and wanting to change it, but the principle is the same. So we have a class and we tag it, and then we can tag a property and basically define like what the predicates are and if it should have an initial state and so on, and also collections. And the code that's auto-generated by this is this on the right here. And this is actually a test that tests that we get this code and then we use it in a way. The benefit of that, and so Prolog is we have a Prolog engine included in the Atom executor. So in the UI, using our JavaScript client, you can just call infer, and you have a Prolog engine at your disposal that has all the links as facts, and this sits on top of it. And so you can do and so we have a triple and also a link predicate as these facts. The link has just more has the other information like the author and timestamp, and triple that really just has the triple. And do you know any Prolog?
I did some in university 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, so it's just predicates, like this is a fact, like saying there is a class called to do, and then the C is just connecting all these other predicates to the same class. And then here we say, so some given base, which is an expression URL, is an instance of it if there's a triple from that base with the predicate stage or something. So this is how we can define the shape in a way that it's it doesn't need the JavaScript, like this kind of engine that, you know, so the Atom CLI I just showed you is built in Rust, and that also has access, and in there we can also see these classes and say, give me all the to-do items, and now maybe, and then to-do state equals something else, and set it, which then also uses the Prolog definition to alter the graph in the expected way. So it's again, it's another, it's like the spanning layerness, or this like yeah, a layer where it's independent of the actual implementation. And Prolog just felt like a right fit because it's so easy to basically match portions of the graph by like and defining it in Prolog. So
Cool.
I don't know, I would love to look into because yeah, I mean, so what you're doing is like pulling in the existing web standards and packaging it as these components is what I'm really interested in, and what I'm intending this to go towards. But again, we have focused more on like the lower level parts, and also packing, like creating an app that really works with Flux. So I'm super interested in understanding more about what you have, and maybe seeing if we can find an easy way to make these things actually compatible. And I'm open to discussing like these decorators. That's new, and I think so. We have a branch in Flux where we started using that. The current implementation and the this social DNA you see here is still manually created in the Flux UI. The drawback is that Flux assumes having complete access and to this perspective, and that like it's the only app for that perspective. The intention is that with the social DNA, it's super easy for somebody to write a different app, or just align an existing app with another app by seeing what is actually the data structure, the classes, the ontology they are using on top of the shared graph.
Yeah.
So, but this is what I want to say is like this is the latest thing we're working on, and this is still open and to being changed. And yeah, so I'm eager to look into if we can maybe meet somehow on that level and just easily make use of both things.
Yeah, so you have subject property or object property. That's literally the same names we use for probably the same thing. So there's some very literal overlap there, which is cool. And yeah, this seems to be if we want to explore how we can connect, which can be sooner over time. But let's keep it in mind, and let's share thoughts. I think that's where my first feeling goes, is where you also just went of like those decorators and those annotations and what sort of index that generates. And yeah, I would definitely suggest to have a look at Shackle. And it seems like you do things outside of the scope of Shackle, which are more like with Woo, like the source of truth and the proof of that. But as far as like the structure of the data, I think Shackle could be really good for that. And with that, you gain access to a lot of tools that are already available for that, as well as that then enters our realm. And so, yeah, that's where we can see if we can link this open source, and the generation of these shapes is accessible. So I can see how we can expose that even a bit better, more succinctly, that we can help. If that's a transition that makes sense to you, it should be in theory a change of ontologies for some things that you're already storing. But yeah, that's to be a bit further explored whether that's a match there. But then that gives access to us, to you generating Shackle shapes, and us using those shapes to then connect that to our components. And then we have your lower level engine and our more UI layer. That could be a pretty cool combination. One other question I had there, you mentioned the name ontology a few times. I was looking for something like RDF or like triples of a typical OWL ontology or something like that, of things like perspective or languages, or is there any other ontology that you define like in triplets that we could use?
Well, so we currently make up ontologies as we go. the idea, maybe this is important to say. So the ADAM is an acronym, and the M stands for meta-ontology, agent-centric depth meta-ontology. So the idea is that the big claim is that if you grant me this miracle of like one ontology, which includes agents, languages, and perspectives, and that's what ADAM is, then that's all we need. And then we can have people like be more free in using their ontologies and changing and evolving them, because we can now actually store an ontology in a language. An ontology becomes a certain language. So
Nico, I think I finally understand language better than you always told me. So language, again, is like the medium I use, like WhatsApp, Facebook, Zoom, Twitter. Like when I use a certain medium as a language, it predicts like, it contains like my expression in a sense. And that's what it's for. So like, that's amazing what we're getting at in that sense.
So yeah, so the base level thing is expression, which is part of language. I mean, so so actually the three things turn into five if you add expressions for the languages, but it's somehow included in the concept. And if you add links to the perspective, it's in the same way included. But then, so you have expressions, and those are authored by agents. And through the languages, they have a global address. They have, you know, a URI that points to that expression. And everybody resolving that URI should get the same objective expression data. In the perspectives, I can now take three of these objective things and create a sentence, like in semantic way, and like what do you do, like linked data apps. And that again, if I want to share this link, it turns into a link expression that I can share. I can come up with a language that doesn't use any storage technology at all, chain or central server, because it's just a static definition of expressions. That's an ontology. So Fove, friend of a friend, I can turn into a Fove language that if I do a get on Fove name, you know, I get something back, but it's static data built into the JavaScript code of the language itself. So by installing the language, you already have all that data, and it's just a mapping between these identifiers and some, you know, documentation data maybe. But then I use the identifiers in my links, like I do in semantic web with these ontologies. But I can now go and say, well, I can use Fove, but I could also say, well, you know, I don't like Fove because it's missing something. And so I just create my own version of it. I turn it into a language. I publish that language in the ADAM language of languages, and I should start using it. And if somebody then enters either my neighborhood, or I send them a perspective on a direct message where I'm using this new language, they can resolve it and get it, and, you know, apps built on top of it can work anyways. But of course, we need the shapes or subject classes, as we call it, to still detect, like a particular UI still needs to say, well, I'm expecting these kinds of shapes, and if it's not that, then, you know, whatever. So if it's not Fove but something else, I just ignore it. But I'm really interested in, and I started this whole thing with as like basically one MVP with a UI perspective, which somehow got into the back burner. But I want to at some point get back to that, having a UI that's something like a new browser, a new agent-centric browser, where I can just go into any neighborhoods and perspectives and visualize them meaningfully. Using components, and if there's a new language, I can just get the language. And so languages they don't have to, but they can also include the web components to visualize their expressions. So in that way, with perspective, entering a new neighborhood, I would even retrieve the UI for rendering these new components in there.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm just gonna say something quick, like from a symphonics perspective, like the invitation is like to us all to just start acting like that social organism and co-create. So in what I mean, an example of that is like, let me and Andrea and Carlen maybe help facilitate the business model of an MVP that would get like both things working, and symphonics and our social architecture and our Togetherland entertainment, like all of it, like all these different apps working, blah, blah, blah. Like, so my invitation is Rene and Nico, keep focusing on like tech resonance when it's in flow for both of you, and like from your specialties as engineers. And of course, like, but we'll just start acting like an organism now. Like there's a department that will be thinking about how to like, and then we'll call everyone in when needed to, because everyone should be part of those conversations to some degree, you know what I mean? Like, but like, yeah, that's where I want to go. So if you guys can like on your own schedule, see what's possible, like what makes sense, like Andrea and I will also be thinking, hopefully Carlin, and like, okay, well, we have these communities, right? That we want to test this with. And like, we'll start thinking about how we can do that and some of the UX. Because I think we need a version of what you're both doing, but perspective is to me the game-changing like product, because it's kind of like what I would call evolutionary networking. It like destroys Facebook and Twitter and Twitter because it's evolutionary networking or evolutionary neural networking or something. I don't know, whatever. It's even the last social network, as Core Nexus would say, if we all got together. So anyway, like I'm just putting that out there. Like I'm excited, like, and I'm understanding both of your projects from different perspectives now. So yeah, that's my invitation as far as that. And I was just flagging, it's been over an hour. So if anyone needs to start wrapping up or just make that explicit, that's cool. And Carlin obviously wanted to give you space to have you share some reflections from many angles, since you do know code and you understand Nico a lot more than I would, for example, if I was just coming on a call. So Carlin does have experience, Nico, like he's following you more than most maybe non-super developers or something. I don't know, but speak for himself, obviously, yeah.
It's been a really, very fun call. Super interesting. I love some of the ideas. I've read through your white papers. I read through what you put up there. And it's definitely making a lot more sense now. I really appreciate the examples that you've given, and I love the further development you brought on. One question that I do have, I see that does each individual who's participating and engaging with Atom, do they need to have an installable node on their device, or is that kind of like an add-on?
No, we are thinking about solutions where the add-on is to not run it on your node, especially if you only have a laptop. So it's already great. We got it to a point where you can use Atom apps on your phone, but you need it running somewhere. And we even have like you just scan a QR code and your phone connects to your computer, but if you close it, then it doesn't work. So we are looking into solutions where just that UX works better. The thing is, so it uses HoloChain, and I also when starting Atom chose for the same license, the CAL, which basically requires that the cryptographic keys are in possession of the actual user. So just offer, and we discuss this like every second week again, like offering a hosting solution where we or somebody would just host machines for the user actually violates the CAL unless we build exactly what the Holo team has built with the Holo ports on Holo, because that's what Holo does, where it runs HoloChain on some other node, but it kind of creates a wormhole to the browser and the keys are there. So also talking to Holo. I mean, I don't know if you know. So I was with the HoloChain team. So and recently started talking with them again, especially about Atom on Holo ports. That seems to be a bit more far. So I mean, a good solution is, I guess, will come after Holo Beta, which I guess will come soon, but it's like so you have to run a node somewhere. That's the point. Like it's
of course, yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, well, I was glad to hear the direction you were going in. You know, this was a conversation point that I brought up with some developers, some holochain maybe 6 years ago, around possible solutions to that particular instance. And I think there are some UX actually ways of handling that as well, in terms of, you know, user onboarding and engagement for those who get a little bit scared when it comes to anything that doesn't work the way they expected it to. And, you know, I think that'd be, you know, a fun route in. And, you know, one of the things that we definitely wanted to be engaging with holochain, and I think that what's showing up here, you know, it can be, you know, real win-win in that sense of, you know, both allowing us to kind of get in and engage in the holochain space a little bit earlier, as well as potentially kind of build for the future a little bit, and build for the future in the sense that kind of build things up in a way where there could be a fluid transition layer between if you're, you know, using like a holochain node system versus if you're on AWS. And, you know, I think ultimately the biggest win is if the average user has no idea what's going on, that's when you have a real win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that was actually an important requirement 3 years ago when I left the Holochain team, and I had conversations with Josh Junto. I mean, so my colleague now. So when it started, I was helping them figure out how to build ideas I've been discussing for years for Junto on Holochain. And the main problem they had is they already had a prototype on a central server. So another requirement that came in is like, oh, well,
Yep.
can we, you know, and this led to thinking about languages in this way, and basically saying, well, we don't, you know, it doesn't matter where in the end it's stored. If we have this overlay, the semantic overlay anyways, then, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
there was,
but also, I mean, an early step is a semantic overlay. There could be, you know, an engagement mechanism that says, oh, you're now kind of entering this space, download this file, similar to the way that when you know, run your first Zoom, you know, you download a file. It's not too confusing for people. So anyways, that's something that we talked about for sure.
yeah, and one thing you said there, Nico, that was still in my mind, just to wrap that up. When I said ontologies, do you have any ontologies? That's just me seeing if to what degree we can implement the language that you use, of languages and perspectives and these sort of thing. What would be helpful, but I don't know if it makes sense, is if you have a definition of that core meta ontology.
Yeah.
In triplets. So a language needs to have. So would it be possible to take a language and describe it in triplets? This language lives in this place, has these properties.
Yeah.
I guess so. I mean, yeah. So we need the base ontology implemented in code, like the executor implements perspectives and languages and so on. But of course, we already have this trick of you know, having languages about the 3 core concepts. There's an agent language, a language, and perspective languages. That makes the thing evolvable. Yeah. So but also picking these languages means like picking the network in, like, you know, mainnet and testnet or something like that, what you have in blockchains. If you change these languages, then you're in a different space. You don't see the other agents. But I mean, definitely that should be possible for people to create alternative bootstrap languages. And then it would make sense to have, you know, these interfaces defined in a more accessible way. Right now, they're just defined in TypeScript in our repository, in the core sub project.
Yeah, we work with TypeScript though, so we can also work with that. I was just curious if that's there. Yeah, cool. And And yeah, really good call. Really good to hear everything that's going on. So much overlap. And it's in the first place super cool to meet someone that's so deeply in this field, so dedicated, building away at some cool stuff. So that's awesome to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited to learn more. And so can you give me like a hint where how I should maybe, I would just want to dive right into your repo and see any hint where I should start or something?
Yeah, there's a tutorial, but it's pretty low level. I'm actually making some new tutorials, but the documentation, it's not super proofread, but if you go to the first thing I sent you, link.org, there you find documentation and you can get into what it is. It's still pretty early days of the release, so let me know what you find, and we can also do a session where I just, after you've made a little bit of sense of it, I just show you and explain it. It might be quicker.
I guess my main question is, how could is there a tutorial where I can use it and I have something running so I can
Yeah, it's there. It's except it will start at a really low level, which is probably fine for you. So it starts at the triples and playing with subjects and predicates and objects, and then goes into shapes. And I think it doesn't even do a component. So that's why I say like we need a bit more tutorials for the new stuff with components. But if you go to the documentation on the live website, you will find the guide and the tutorial. It's a 7-step thing that you can probably run through pretty quickly.
Cool. Awesome.
And yeah, maybe let's set up a shared Telegram group or something like that. Just to keep some information flowing and see when we next want to reconvene.
I would also, if we want to, I thought about almost putting somebody from our team in this call, but maybe the next one. I will definitely share this because we just before the call, I got a message with the HackMD suggestions how we we might change our subject, decorator. So it's like spot on.
Yeah, if we set up a group, I have a specific page on documentation of these shapes and how we annotate them. It's more as a user perspective. It doesn't go in depth of what's happening behind, and I can explain more about that in a different call.
Cool.
But I'll share that link.
Cool.
I'll set up the Telegram just as a place of easier exchange of anything, not to be a busy channel for everyone, just to be the other place that we're.
Yeah.
Are you guys using Discord? Because you can also, if you want to just join.
I mean, yeah, I guess if you both use Discord, then maybe you can create even a group in the Perspectivism Nico channel for this project, like a project channel.
Yeah.
And
we also have a link, a linked Discord. Yeah.
I just see a lot of places where there's actually more complementary pieces in the space, like from front end to back end, from user to everything. Like there's a wide, diverse talents like in this space that can account for a lot of the things that would be beneficial to everyone.
And that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I am also very excited.
And just getting to the point where we're working so much smarter than harder that we all work like 12 minutes a week, and the rest of the eternity, or we're always just doing something else that's more fun. The most possible fun. Cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for joining. Thanks for being part of the episode. This was an epic episode of the weapon, a peek behind the curtain of the weapon of mass co-creation. Like this is like my most valuable NFT ever.
I mean, this is, it's so much fun. The vantage point there, because the focus really has been so intertwined, but yet pretty distinct in terms of where the core thinking and code has been put together. So very interested to see how this can interface. And there's so many incredible use cases in terms of engaged communities that come from this. So yeah, this will be fun rabbit hole to dive down. So which one do we want to? Where do we want to set up on Discord?
Yeah, we each have a Discord channel.
I see right here.
We can set up a group, like a direct message group, or we set up a channel in one of the servers. I sent our server over.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm also we could also create a group in Flux, but we're just about to start dogfooding it. It's right now. It's maybe there will be updates, and then we have to, the data is gone again.
Well,
Not yet.
We'll
but
switch over when it makes sense. We'll switch over when it makes sense for sure.
Can you post a link, Nico, to
Yeah,
your Discord channel?
it's also, you can find it on the Adam website, but I can also create a
Let's
invite.
What was the new Adam website?
Yeah, I would just put that in. There you go.
Yeah.
And oh, okay. The links, the social links are not there on the new website. I will send you an invite.
Fine.
Here you go.
Yeah. Perfect. Join perspectivism. Nice one. All right, guys. I'm gonna round up, getting late here, but
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for your time. They're in, Rene's out in Bali, by the way, Nico, and Carlen's in Bali at the moment, but I think he's normally on the West Coast. Generally, I don't know, but just as a location thing. Yes. Thank you. I'll keep in touch. I'll help keep conducting. Lots of love. Thank you guys for your
Sounds
time.
good.
Right.
thanks so much. Thanks so much for setting this up.
Right on.
Yep,
Take care.
talk to you soon.
Good meeting you guys.
Nice to
Same.
see you, Nico.
Yeah, wonderful.
Be in touch.